All right. And now we're recording. Okay. So we'll go ahead and get the festivities started here. Welcome to the monthly SABR North Florida Buck O'Neill Chapter Social for the month of September. How's everybody doing this evening?
All right.
Good. Yeah, good.
Very good. Good. I imagine we'll have a few more folks coming in a little bit later, but that's all right. We'll admit them as they join us. Curious, first off here, what did people think of what ended up being something of a more active maybe than anticipated trade deadline? Are you happy with what your team got, if your team got anything? Or are you disappointed because your team got nothing? Or what's your take on it?
Great for San Diego.
Yeah.
Yeah, the newly rebuilt San Diego Padres.
Really?
That was impressive. AJ Preller has no problem going and getting what he wants when he wants it. And yeah, he what was that, about a quarter of that roster turned over? It was ridiculous. So, but good for them. I'm glad to see that, because I like seeing the different teams in the mix for the playoffs. Even if we have the playoffs, it's more than 50% of the major league franchises. I'm happy to see teams like the Rays and the Padres being involved and actually going for it. Even if the Rays didn't do much, not like there was a heck of a lot they needed to do. They just needed to hope the Yankees didn't do much, and their wish was granted. So
They picked up somebody who gets hurt.
I think it's great for the game, for the small market teams to contend, and it's especially good for the fans in those cities who, you know, are used to just kind of hanging around the 500 mark to all of a sudden have a potential championship team. I think it's fantastic for the game.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, you know, we're talking about a 60-game season here, and this is the most unusual of unusual circumstances, but nevertheless, it counts. I mean, we're talking about this decades to come, but it's a legitimate season and it counts. And so whoever walks away with the pennant walks away with the championship. It's theirs.
I don't think it's fantastic.
Oh, is there
Oh, God. Let's hear your argument, Glenn.
Oh, wait, hold on. Where's my control? I got to mute him. Hold on.
Yeah, I'm just, you know, this was my year to see the Dodgers Yankees World Series. And I'm not as sure now as I was a couple months ago that it would.
Now it's looking less certain, a little less certain.
Mm-hmm.
But not out of the question, not impossible.
Well, I don't feel too badly with our 5 best hitters. You know, I've been on the injured list for a while. Well, we'll be in there at the end.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, I mean, you get into that. I mean, we've seen this. You get into other sports that have 16-team playoffs. Anything can happen. And we're going to see this year, I do feel like that anything can happen. I mean, in a short series, even a team like the Blue Jays, not a great rotation, but a team like that, they might be able to scare somebody. They might be able to jump up and bite the #1 seed if they are the 8th seed in the AL. You never know. Never know. But I wouldn't lose faith if I were a Yankees fan yet. There's still a lot of games, and there's still talent on that roster.
They aren't playing the Mets every night.
Nope, definitely not.
Yeah.
The Tampa Bay Rays are the ones that I fear most of all. They're so good. I really like them. Did anybody see that pitch last night at the head? Did anybody watch that game?
It was on. It was on several sports shows today.
Yeah, I didn't see it happen, but I saw it, the videos today.
Yeah, it was awful. I mean, you just sit there and go, why in the world would somebody do that?
Yeah,
You know.
Chapman got suspended and so did Boone. I don't know if you saw that.
Oh, really? So
Yeah.
Chapman got suspended? Good.
He's appealing.
Boone
He's appealing.
for
They should have been tossed 3 seconds after that pitch.
Yep. You know, you're right. I mean, that was horrible. And why? I assume just because they won all the games.
No, of course it is.
Yeah.
That's the New York fraud way.
Yeah.
And the only thing that could make this terrible season more terrible would be if the Yankees and the Dodgers wound up in the World Series.
Says you. Who the hell you think you are?
I'll tell you what, this seems like as good a time as any for those of us who are invested in our annual prognostications to go ahead and give that a look. So let me go ahead and share screen on that one. All right, and here we are. Thus far, 2/3 of the season, 2 months into the season, 2/3 of the season. And who was just belly aching about his poor Yankees is actually in the lead by a nose.
For the time being.
For the time being, as you said, leading at the All-Star break. Congratulations.
Yep. Good
Actually,
point.
it's 6/10 of the way.
It's better.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yes.
For all of
6/10.
us that picked Cleveland, there was 8 of us that picked Cleveland. I think they just sold away their year.
Possible. What do folks think? You think it's going to be, you think they cashed it in by trading Clevenger?
I think they did.
Possible.
Steve, what did you think? They just wanted him out of the clubhouse?
I thought that was more that was sort of the message for unity for everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah. I think they had to save that clubhouse, and he was poisoned at this point. So I think they got some interesting pieces back for him, but I think the most interesting pieces are several years away. The ones they got for major league use right now aren't really going to amount to much, I don't think.
Yeah, but I think if this year's a throwaway year, you let Minnesota have it, and you're playing for next full season.
Yeah, or the White Sox. I mean,
Well, that's the wild card in that.
oh yeah,
Yeah, they're playing.
that is a scary lineup. That is a legitimate lineup. They are a force.
You know, at the beginning of the year, I thought both the White Sox and the Reds had a chance. The Reds, I don't understand them. With that pitching they got, they should be up higher, doing better than they are.
Yep. They're a team that on paper doesn't have many weaknesses, but put them on the field and they have definitely underperformed. Definitely underperformed.
Well, is San Diego, they're better positioned, I guess, against the Dodgers, but I don't know if that did it or not.
To take the Dodgers, probably not, but to secure that number 2 position in the West and
Yeah.
through what will hopefully for them be favorable matchups, because the NL is going to send probably 2 teams under 500 to this thing. So the way things are looking right now. So never know. They definitely have built themselves quite a roster, though. It's pretty impressive.
Well, and this year the way the playoffs are set up you just got to get in. There's really no advantage for anybody. I mean, I don't know how they're home field isn't really that much of an advantage or however they're going to do a bubble if they're talking about that.
Yeah, and that's an interesting little wrinkle if they end up doing bubbles for the leagues for each round or for consecutive rounds, whatever.
However they do it. I mean, that's well, like everything else. I think they'll figure it out the week before.
Yep. I just hope they figure it out and don't start changing things midstream. That's the worry I have with them.
Yeah, Bob Nightingale this morning in USA Today said the American League would probably be in the Southern California and the National League in the Texas stadiums.
Huh.
So we'll see what comes of that. I mean, he may be just guessing. I don't know if he has any inside info.
So
Is the first round of the playoffs postseason? Is it 5-game series or
3 games?
Three.
three?
Which is
In the high
why,
seed park.
Yeah, and that's why I think teams like the Blue Jays might have a shot at that, because with a top 3 like they have, that could at least be interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I think any club. I mean, it's just all you get. Just need 2
No.
hot pitchers.
Right.
You move
Yeah,
on.
2 hot pitchers in a 3-game. But
Yeah, but that could knock out the Dodgers. I mean, it depends on
Yep.
anybody. I mean, that's
Very true.
So you just want to get into the playoffs, and then from there it's just who knows what the hell.
Yeah, yeah. And I think in the case of the Blue Jays and a few other teams that went out and made moves, they were thinking exactly that. They built a roster just to get themselves in, and that was it. So.
You have to look at the strength of schedule of the games that are left, and there are certain teams that seem to have an advantage.
Who are they?
Yeah, let's see. Is that
Well,
your
you
head?
got San Diego has a full series against the Angels and the A's and the Giants. LA has to play Houston and LA and against Colorado and Arizona and complete their set with San Diego.
Hey, Chuck, is this your head-to-head schedule that you put together?
Yes, that's the head-to-head. Well, what's left?
Okay. Are you guys seeing that right now? I should be projecting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no projections. That's actual games as
No,
of
no.
last night.
I'm projecting it. I'm showing it. I'm sharing it. That's what I meant. I'm not projecting it.
But you have like Tampa Bay has the Mets and the Phillies and the Nats. They have yet to play again against them. That's Tampa Bay.
Hmm.
Yeah. Right there.
If you go over to Fangraphs, they give a strength of future schedule. And it's based upon a 0.5 is an even balanced schedule. And if it's above 0.5, it's like harder, and below 0.5, it's lower. I didn't write down them all, but it was obvious that there were some teams that, like Milwaukee, they are going against KC and Cleveland, which gives them something like a 0.6 in the Central as an easy schedule.
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't say a 0.6, but their advantage.
Yeah.
They're expected to win 60% of the games, in other words.
Right. But they're 3 games under, and they are headed in the wrong direction right now in terms of their momentum.
Right. But I was surprised at how much within their own division and league the series is over with.
Yeah.
Part of 1 September.
Yep. Yep. They haven't played the Cardinals yet. Then again, the Cardinals haven't played anybody, so they're going to be playing catch up all month long. All right. Anything else that anyone wants to bring up about the trade deadline and where we are with 6/10, 2/3, whatever it might be of the season complete? Any other thoughts?
When does the regular season end?
I think it's the last day of September. Week 10 is a short week. It's like a 4-day week for week 10. So week 6, which was last night, is, you want to say, it's 3.5 weeks left.
Yeah, I think it ends on the 27th.
Is that what it is?
I think so.
I can look it up.
Yeah, and then the postseason starts this day. So
Will some teams not have played a full schedule by then?
yeah, I think it's almost inevitable. There'll be some teams that didn't play the full 60. Cardinals for one.
Yeah.
I can't see them doing it. But I also don't know if they're going to make it either. I'm not sure about that.
Well, now there's 12 games that were missed. There's only 6 of them programmed for double headers in September. So there's 6 games, which involve 12 teams, that won't get to play, I guess, their full schedule.
Yeah. Yeah, it is what it is. We'll just see how it all washes out. Again, we'll be talking about this for decades to come. There is nothing like it. Nothing like it. Not even a strike shortened season like 95. Nothing like it.
Matt,
Sure.
with virtually everybody, I'm getting like a double echo. Is that only on my end or is everybody hearing that?
I'm getting.
I'm getting it.
Yeah. Getting it well.
All right, let me do this. All right, got everybody muted. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. All right. Well, I've got everybody muted at the moment. We can start taking your stuff from mute. Let's see if we can figure out where it's coming from. I wasn't really hearing.
I was still hearing it while we were all muted. So
Okay.
sort of like somebody's got a radio or something in the background. That's
Yeah, you can hear talking.
Okay.
The person who's Connie, that's where that noise shows anyway that it's coming from.
Yeah. Let's see. Rick.
Connie.
Rick, you might want to get your tech support. Yeah, oh, there he goes. Okay. Tech support's on its way.
He might have something playing on his computer or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it's possible. Yeah.
I'm sure it has to do with his slower connection out there.
Well, actually, he is not out in the boonies, not at his Riverside residence right now. So yeah, he's actually at Connie's place, and she would have much better Wi-Fi and much wider bandwidth. Oh, okay. Here comes tech support. Yeah, I just heard the door shut there, even though it says he's on mute.
Is he muted now?
Yeah, can hear you. It's a little slow, a little sluggish, but I can hear it. Showing his bandwidth is low.
I don't like the sound of that.
No, it's nothing personal, Rick. It really isn't.
I don't know what to do.
Well, I'll tell you what, while we're working through that, I think we're probably ready, Kent, that is, if you're ready, to go ahead with the next item, discussion about that article that you found on sportsnet.ca about Larry Lester, the longtime, very well-known, very well-respected SABR member, but chair of the Negro Leagues Research Committee and an authority on Negro Leagues baseball history and statistics. Do you feel like you're ready to step in the box and take your crack at hosting the discussion on the article?
Kate, you have to unmute yourself, I think.
Okay.
Yeah,
There we go. Okay. I'm sure I had heard Larry mentioned in at SABR meetings, conferences and such, but the article really sparked my interest, renewed my interest in what he has done and what he is doing. And I have a suspicion that a few of the people here online know him personally, which I don't. But there were some particular things that caught my interest. One of them being that he was personal friends with Buck O'Neill. Obviously, for the Buck O'Neill chapter, that's a huge thing, and also that I'm slowly going through an autobiography, or not an autobiography, a biography of Satchel that Matt loaned me, and Larry apparently went to school with some of Satchel's children, which I thought was pretty amazing, and also one of the founders of the Negro League Museum, which Roger and I had the pleasure of visiting last summer, and that was quite an experience. And also, what really grabbed me was all of those things, but especially the story of his quote discovery unquote of Bullet Rogan, and pretty much guiding that individual into the Baseball Hall of Fame, where I guess, according to the things that I've read, Bullet Rogan had pretty much been completely forgotten until Larry got on it. So let's see, there was, oh yeah, I did want to say that I noted that I did do a little more research beyond that article, and saw his introduction at the 2016 Malloy Conference on why Black baseball history matters. I'm guessing maybe some of us were there to see it, but it's available on YouTube. And there's also a pretty interesting interview with him on YouTube. It was done by a Kansas City sportscaster at the Negro League Hall of Fame. So, and also there's the text of the Chadwick Award that Mr. Lester received in 2016. So all in all, quite a life in baseball without having played it, at least not obviously professionally. So I'll, having said that, I'll turn it over to the group and the chapter, and hear what anyone else might have to say about it.
Yeah, Larry was instrumental early on in the existence of this chapter, as we were sort of starting to, it was really more or less four of us. It was me, Jeff English, Connie, Rick, and Fred, who were the core local members. There were some other folks who were members at the time, but they weren't really involved in the chapter even after we formed it. In specifically trying to find a good name for the chapter, a person after whom we could name this chapter who had regional or local connections to the area of North Florida. And we bandied about some names and ideas, and we ultimately settled on Buck O'Neill as someone we wanted to see if we could get the proper permission to name the chapter after. At the time, SABR required that you make an effort to contact the family, the descendants, the estate, whomever, whatever, of the person in question that you wanted to name the chapter after. And Larry was absolutely critical to us being able to get ultimately to Buck O'Neill's younger brother, Warren, who was his only living immediate relation at that point. Buck and his wife had no children. And Warren, through the O'Neill's estate attorney, gave us permission to use his name for the chapter. And Larry was critical to getting us to the point of being able to get with the right person, Warren O'Neill, the estate attorney, and also the Negro League Baseball Museum, and Ray Doster, who was vice president for curation at the time at the museum. He also was very critical in getting us the necessary contacts to get permission to name the chapter after Buck. But it was Larry who was really the critical linchpin in making that happen. And that was just a that's a small example of what he's done to help in terms of keeping Negro League Baseball alive. He's a fantastic scholar, fantastic writer, and a fantastic researcher. He's compiled some amazing statistics. There we go. And as Kent was alluding to, one of the things that he had to do was a lot of the microfilm, microfiche, day after day, hours late into the evening, into the early morning, doing that research, sitting at one of those things and pulling box scores or pieces of box scores out of old articles from African-American newspapers from the early mid-20th century. Pittsburgh Courier, Chicago Defender, Amsterdam News, all of those. So yeah, his creds as far as research are unparalleled in the field of Negro League baseball, for sure. Anyone else?
Matt, I wanted to say that if we all enjoy the retro sheet stats or baseball ref and, MLB AM stats or whatever it is, 15 years ago or so, we had like 0.5% of the stats. Now, thanks to him, we now have 25% or even more of those game by game kind of stats. But it's going to take a bunch of folks to hit the newspapers and everything else to flush them all out.
Yeah, but think about the ratio, the growth in the number of statistics you just mentioned there, Chuck. You said it was what, about 15 years ago you had 0.5%, something like that?
Yes.
And then within the last 15 years, we're now up to 25% of that. That's massive growth for one person, no less.
Yes.
I mean,
actually, he heads the team. I think there's only 5 or 6 guys that are on the Negro League committee going into it. All the others are onto the biography end of it, not the number crunching end.
Right. And unfortunately, there are fewer than there used to be because there were some pretty big lions who were on that number crunching end, like a Dick Clark or somebody like that. And they've passed, unfortunately. So that's not a group that seems to be getting bigger in terms of its size, I don't believe. But yeah, the ability of someone like a Larry Lester to be able to persuade the Hall of Fame and the Veterans Committee at the time to go back and re-examine the career of a forgotten Negro leaguer like Bullet Rogan, and later the work that he helped do with the special committee they had for the Negro Leagues that led up to the 2006 induction of like 17, I believe, Negro League.
Right.
Didn't include Buck, unfortunately, which is its own discussion. But yeah, the work that he helped contribute to that effort was significant, pretty massive. And I see Glenn sitting there with his portrait of Buck.
Buck wanted to come to the party, you said.
Yes, there you go.
Hey,
Decked out in his Monarchs finery.
Yeah, I'd love to hear, Kent, you and Roger talk a little bit about the museum. What was it like?
Roger?
Yeah, other than Kent being with me, it was incredibly enjoyable.
Company not was
the converse is equally true. I just say that.
Yeah, it's one of those places. It's Smithsonian quality, without a doubt. And I don't know if other chapter members have been there, so please chime in along with Kent and me. It's one of those things that a couple of days, or more, if you just wanted to really study the exhibits and read everything, to me, a relatively novel thing, which I really enjoyed. They have kind of a miniature, I don't know, a 1/3 size diamond with life-size figures of the creme de la creme statues on the diamond. And that's one of the unique features. And then, of course, all sorts of memorabilia, paraphernalia, historical photographs. It's quite something. And the hallmark is the quality of the presentation rivals any museum I've been in.
I agree.
So it was like was Satchel like the pitcher on the mound?
Yes.
And then Josh Gibson catching?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
That must have been neat.
Yeah, it's one of the centerpieces of any kind of picture or feature of the museum that you'll see. Is one of the things that they really highlight. It's gorgeous. Yeah, Bob Kendrick, who's their current president, is a dynamic speaker, dynamic presenter. He's been interviewed quite a bit in the last couple of years. May have been interviewed again more recently, I believe, for Jackie Robinson Day. And when he's interviewed, he's typically interviewed in that setting in the Negro League Baseball Museum because it's so beautiful, that statuary. Anyone else with any comments on the article?
Yeah, I would ask you, Matt, have you met Larry Lester at any of the Malloy conferences or?
Yeah, I've known Larry for, gosh, I think the first time I met him in person was 2010 when I went to SABR 40 in Atlanta along with Rick and Jeff, and got to meet him in person for the first time there, and then went to the Malloy conference in 2014 when it was in Detroit and got to work with him there. And he is a great guy. He is very approachable, very open, very friendly. I've always had great conversations with him. Again, as I mentioned earlier, he's tremendously supportive in terms of us getting Buck's name on our chapter. He really is a good guy, a legit good guy, and a very good guy to work with as well. And I highly recommend, although of course it was postponed this year, just like SABR 50 was postponed, but the Malloy conference, if they do indeed end up having it in Birmingham next year as scheduled, I highly recommend, cannot recommend highly enough that folks attend that, because you get an experience at a conference like that with this smaller attendance and fewer.
Is he still pushing the banner idea, the pennants?
I don't know if he's still pushing that. That article didn't say whether he's still trying to make that happen or not. But
because Birmingham would get a couple of them.
Yeah, the Black Panthers would get a couple, and I mean, I think that's a fantastic idea, and I can't imagine why at least the Royals. I mean, in Kansas City,
right?
Lester's hometown, Buck O'Neill's hometown in the Negro League Baseball Museum. I can't imagine why the Royals at least didn't want to honor the Monarchs that way, because I mean, they still honor their affiliation with the Monarchs in other ways. They still honor their affiliation with Buck O'Neill, who retired. His last official job was working as a scout for them in the front office. And they have a chair dedicated to him where he sat for every game for years watching the Royals. I just don't know why the Royals at the very least don't do something like that.
I mean, I wonder if that's something, if you approach him and ask him if he's still doing that, we could just give him some moral support and say this chapter's behind it, at least for, some of the places there.
Yeah, I would be happy to reach out with that support to him and see if he was still trying to make that happen. I know one of the reasons why there was no Malloy conference in 2019 is that he had some personal challenges he was working through caring for relatives, family who were going through some serious health crises. And so he punted on trying to do the Malloy for 2019. And that kind of tells you just how critical he is to the Negro League Baseball research experience. It's that they have to put the whole committee or the whole conference on hold because he's not able to help make it happen. So that's the kind of influence he has in the field. He really is the preeminent man in that regard. But yeah, I would have no problem reaching out to him and asking him. As a matter of fact, he's a member by extension of this chapter. He joined this chapter very soon after we came into existence as the Buck O'Neill chapter. So, and I've invited him to every Zoom meeting, but now, of course, the man is quite busy. So, all right, Kent, thank you very much. Appreciate that. That was very good.
My pleasure.
I won't ask for a volunteer now, but if someone out there would like to take on next month's article discussion challenge, let me know. As Kent found with this particular article, there's a long list of them every week in This Week in SABR to choose from. However, most of them, as Kent found out and shared with me, most of them are behind pay sites. So that is a challenge if you want to take this on as a task for next month. If you're interested in it, is finding an article if you can that isn't behind a paywall, or if you have access to that article behind the paywall, if you in the body of an email or in a Word document, you would attach to the email and send it to everybody so we can read it in advance.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
when you were at the museum last year, did you notice if it has a souvenir booklet?
Kent, Roger, do you remember if it did?
There was a gift shop, a pretty decent sized gift shop, that, you know, as museums almost always do anymore.
Yes, they do.
Catch you on the way out. I can't recall something that looked like what you were
Because
asking about. It might have been there.
I was there in 2006 or 7. The last time SABR had a convention in St. Louis. And we went to Kansas City first, saw a couple of ball games, went to the museum, went to other things in Kansas City, and then drove across the state to St. Louis for the convention. And the museum is as great as you say it is, but the one drawback is that it had no booklet, and you're not allowed to take pictures. Well, you can't do both of those things. You can't tell people to come in, not take pictures, and then send them home with nothing. You can't do that.
Yeah.
First of all, you're wasting money.
I did take a lot of pictures, and nobody told me not to. So
Well, there was a rule back then that you couldn't do that.
Yeah, well, you know, 15 years later,
Yes.
Yeah, that's
camera was okay.
But they're missing out on a lot of cash without having a booklet.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think they're a lot more savvy about the marketing and about the promotional than they used to be. I think that at certain times they've kind of ebbed and flowed as a museum in terms of their management and in terms of their ability to keep the membership engaged, to keep people to renew their support and so forth. And I think right now they seem to be in pretty good hands. The trick with the museum, I will say this about the museum from what I understand, and I'm a member of the museum, but in all these years that museum's been in existence in one form or another since the early 90s, I've never been able to get to Kansas City to see it. So I've been a supporter from afar. But the one thing I've heard about that museum from Larry Lester, actually, who is not as tightly connected with that museum as he once was, is that while they do a wonderful job of presenting the history, and while they do a wonderful job of preserving artifacts and information about the history, there is a lack of effort on the part of the museum, in his opinion, to do a better job of educating people and of researching and of preserving data and information that is accessible to everyone. That they're more about showing you a very beautiful front that is the museum with that great sculpture area and the artifacts and everything else. But as far as promoting the museum, they're not as effective. Now, with the current president, that might be changing. There is also the Buck O'Neill Research Center just down the street from the Negro League Baseball Museum there in the 18th and Vine District in Kansas City. That may play more of a role in trying to achieve that which Larry has been somewhat critical of the museum in the past. We'll see. Remains to be seen. But yeah, I think if they miss out on an opportunity to give you a booklet of information about different artifacts and history and so forth, that is a shortcoming. But it seems like they're moving, I would say, from what I understand, in the right direction as far as trying to get past those issues they've had. Anyone else?
Yeah, we did have a comment in the chat room about photography at the museum, if you want to take a look at that, Matt.
Cool. Thank you, Meredith. Yes, from their website, photography and video recording is allowed in the Negro League Baseball Museum. Be sure to tag at NLBM Prez on Twitter. That's Bob Kendrick there, and Instagram, so that we can see and share. Remember, commercial reproduction of displays and artifacts are strictly prohibited. Sort of like express written consent when you're watching a ball game there. Same sort of effect.
Right.
But yes, there you go. That's good. That's shows a little bit more evidence of them having moved into a more progressive stance on things. Okay, excellent. Thank you, Kent. Much appreciated. All right.
My pleasure.
Cleanup hitter time. Roger, are you ready to regale us with your presentation on type cards?
Absolutely.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and get this thing ready to go. There we go. All right. Here we go. And all right, everybody able to see the slide presentation there?
And Matt, that's not the first slide.
Oh, I got it.
That's like maybe,
I backed it up. Yep. I cheated. I was starting to go through it myself earlier today and I forgot to back it up.
all right. Type collecting. I think like many of you, for 4, 5, 6 year period as a kid, for me that was mid 50s to 61. I collected Topps cards, and you know, at that time, at least my friends and I that collected cards, there was just several ways you did it. A common one was just to try to get collected cards of players from your favorite team. Some kids only collected cards of their favorite player. I think most other folks tried to get every card for the year and would trade. Well, there's all sorts of other types of ways to collect cards. And one is when I returned to collecting in 1980 for about a 10-year period, I got involved in type collecting. And what that means is if, let's say, you were type collecting in the 50s, you tried to get one of every year of every set of cards that were put out there. Bowman's and Topps being primary ones. There were others. I think somebody last meeting when Glenn was going has talked about Hostess cards and many others. And that's a type collection. You're just simply trying to get one card from every set of cards that's been printed. From the late 1900s to 1950, there's been about 1,000 of those, mostly obscure to most of us. And roughly about 500 of those existed, as you're looking at the screen there, 19th century to 1920, and about 500 from 1920 to 1950. So what I tried to do here is take a very small sampling of those 500 that represent kind of the key sets of this era, 19th century to 1920, and then maybe a few anomalies and maybe a few that include unusual players. So the emphasis is really on the card. And what I did find curious when I was doing this for that 10-year period, there were only a couple of reference points, and it was kind of pre-internet. I've learned more in the last week getting ready for this on most of these type cards than I learned in that 10 years. So there's just a lot more out there. We've got at least one member here that knows a lot more about this than I do. So any of you feel free to chime in if you want to add something. Okay, Matt, the next slide, please. Old Judge cards, tobacco cards. Goodwin and Company was the dominant tobacco company of the era. And these cards were the equivalent of the Topps of 50s and 60s, the preeminent, most popular, by far the largest in terms of numbers of players, 512 players. They are studio black and white, kind of sepia tone photos. So these are 130 years old, roughly, certainly aged, and they're on kind of a thick cardboard, and they were inserted in the packets of cigarettes, one per packet of cigarette. The two players there happen to be Hall of Famers. Just a little comment on it, because again, for me, getting back in, I've always loved 19th century baseball. Billy Hamilton 5 times led the league, led the major leagues in stolen bases, walks, and on-base percentage. And Ed Delahanty 5 times led in OPS. You find these cards in all sorts of conditions, from horrible to a common thing that people did was cut off the ad on the bottom. And they come in a variety of fronts. These two just happen to be kind of the standard front. You can see the size there, relatively small cards, but by far the biggest issue to that time, and for many years, the largest issue. Okay, Matt, maybe next slide then. Allen and Ginter was a much smaller tobacco company, and actually their product was kind of a little cigar, which was widely popular at the time. There are some collectors of cards that feel these are the most beautiful cards ever produced. Everybody seems to have their favorites. There's quite a few people that go with this set of cards, as was not uncommon. If you look on the back there, the baseball players comprise only 10 of the 40 of these cards. And by the way, baseball cards are a minor part, as it turns out, of all the kinds of cards that were produced in this era. A minor part, probably a tenth of the kinds of cards on all manner of things. The notation, by the way, N28, a fellow named Burdick developed what some people refer to as the Bible of baseball card collecting, last printed in 1960. He numbered all the different sets of cards. This was the 28th set that he numbered. Later, Sports Collectors Digest, that started producing a big catalog, added the N for the 19th century. One of my favorite 19th century stats here is with John Clarkson. So in 1885, he was a mere 53-16, and he completed 68 of the 70 games he started, 623 innings pitched, and he was 5'10", 155 pounds. I enjoyed that. There have been a few changes. Okay, next set, Matt. Another colorful set of the era, much smaller. Again, this is Goodwin and Champions, the dominant tobacco company that produced that first extensive series. 50 champions, of which 8 are baseball players. The other categories there, things like riflery and boxing, etc. Quite colorful for the area. Collectors like them for that reason. This gentleman, as you know, Hall of Famer, 5-time batting champion. Next slide, Matt, please. Mayo's cut plug. The last and most dominant card collected, produced in the 1890s. Tobacco products were getting away, and baseball cards were being reduced in general in terms of advertising. Here's an example. Rick, by the way, if you're still here, I know you're an error person. You can see Amos Russi's name is misspelled on his card. It comes in both types. And just like error cards today in cards, the error card, there were more of these printed with the error than without. So his regular spelling is what's popular. He won the pitching Triple Crown one time. Kid Nichols, where the advertising's been cut off, very common, reduces the value of the card significantly. On an 8-year period, 7 times had 30 or more wins. He topped out at 548 innings pitched one of those years.
Oh, was that all?
That's it, 548. Okay, next slide. Breach Williams, confectioner. The E denotes a series of candy which started to develop, and this is probably one if not the rarest issues type cards. And it presented the style that then was used through the 20s with tobacco cards taking on this kind of style. This happened to be photographs. It coincided with the beginning of the American League. There's a lot of minor league players in this series. It so happens it's the first time ever a card of any type spelled baseball as one word. So that happened in 1903 for the first time. Rube Waddell, 6 consecutive times, led the league in strikeouts. Okay, next slide, Matt. For this period of time, through the introduction of tobacco cards, which is coming up, the candy cards, in this case, American Caramel, which was the dominant company, but also Philadelphia Caramels and lots of others. I've got a few more. Kind of following the pattern of the card you just saw, how they were drawings on color backgrounds. Of the caramel cards, this is kind of the standard bearer, just like Topps would be to the 50s. There were only 100 cards. It says 120. I'm sorry. There were 120 cards. It says on the back 100. Again, the series of cards and the number of people producing them was going down in this period of time. Okay, Matt, the next one, please.
Were they nationwide kind of cards or?
American, yes, everything to this point is nationwide.
Okay, because.
And Jim, you point out a good thing. A lot of the typesets of this and every era into the 50s and 60s were regionals. I'm a Milwaukee Braves fan. There's 8 or 10 types of cards that are just Milwaukee Braves. So that's a good point. What I'm showing you so far, that so happens the next one up is going to be regional. Yes, we're nationally distributed.
Roger?
Thank you.
Roger, on this one, when there were 120 cards actually, but only 100 subjects, does that mean there were duplicate cards of some of the players, or does that mean they didn't acknowledge in the publication here of 100, they made a mistake, or did they have scenes of baseball on cards, or why is that? Why would the 120?
You know, I should have an answer for you. I don't on this specific issue. You do find this a lot where it's both of what you described. It's simply an error. They came up with the printing and they ended up with 120. Many times there's 107 or 8 subjects, but they're a total of only 100 players. It cuts both ways in many of these sets of cards. And on this set, I'm not sure which it is. It could very well be what you said, is that it's 100 subjects printed on 120 cards, different poses, not unusual in this era at all. Okay, next slide, Matt. So here's a regional issue. Z-Nuts, kind of like a Cracker Jack product put out by Collins McCarthy Confectioners. This started the longest running series of baseball cards until Topps came around, 28 years, Pacific Coast League cards. And as I'm sure most of you know, Pacific Coast League was, almost an alternative professional league. And these were by many collectors viewed as very beautiful, particularly the first couple of years. Studio produced high quality photographic images considerably larger than the issues we've been looking at up to this point. And a number of these players did pitch in the major leagues at one time or another. I don't believe this player did. He pitched 2 years, parts of 2 years, had a total of 5-10 record, as you can see, 3.18 ERA, but his career was mostly in the Pacific Coast League. But the importance of this issue was it was the first major issue of the Pacific Coast League, lasted 28 years. Okay, next slide, Matt. Same company put out 1 year in their Home Run Kisses product, which was kind of a jaw breaker type product. In the bags of them, put out this a little bit more ornate, similarly sized card. Again, here's an ex-major league player that then ended his career with a number of years in the Pacific Coast League. In fact, he averaged about 500 plate. He was a full-time starter, averaging about 500 plate appearances a year when he was in the majors, and then spent several years at Pacific Coast League post his major league experience. Okay, next slide, Matt. Cracker Jack. Well, this was their first issue. We all know the product. Of the candy series, it designated their E145-2. They put them out for several years. It's arguably the most popular at the time. I'm not sure whether in terms of collectors it's the most popular, but at the time it was the most popular in terms of printing and distribution. 144 players the first year, 176 players the second year, still modest compared to our friends, the old Judge from the late 1880s. These came, and most of them, as you can see from this one, got oil and staining. You could, if you wanted, you could collect 100 coupons. You got one coupon per bag of the Cracker Jacks and send in a quarter, and they'd send you all the players' cards. And those are highly, highly, highly sought after by collectors, the unstained ones. This is a stained one. Limited major league player with St. Louis and Boston in the National League. Had one decent year, batted .287, was a half-time basically outfielder. Cracker Jacks then only did this for a couple of years, and then they came back much later, 50s or 60s with a couple of issues.
Very similar look too, right?
Yes, yes. Font is similar.
Yeah.
Does anybody remember? I can't remember what year it was. It's so long ago, but probably late 70s, early 80s, probably in the early 80s. Cracker Jack came out with a miniature version of these. Do you remember that? You could get them in Cracker Jacks, a tiny, a little like a 1 inch by 1 inch or 1.5 by 1.5.
Yeah, I think I've got one or two. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't have one of those, and that is considered a tight card. That's an example of a series of cards, different players that were available.
Huh. I see that this one even mentions in the little smaller disclaimer on the back, the reverse of the card, it actually talks about the Federal League. Cards of that 1 year of the Federal League. That's kind of cool.
Okay, next slide then, Matt. Thank you. Okay, this one is a very small series. I threw this in because Hall of Fame buffs will probably recognize this name. The unusual size, black and white photo, almost thin paper, almost couldn't be called a card. I can't say I'm a fan of this guy, but he certainly appears on a lot of lists of, on the bubble for being in the Hall of Fame. Thorne and Palmer put him really high on their list as somebody that should be in the Hall of Fame. And I did a little more research. I'm interested in getting a biography on him. He bounced around a lot, five or six different teams in his career, and noted to be a real hothead. But quite an accomplished player. Hit in 42 consecutive games one time.
Wow.
1 year, close to a Triple Crown year, 359 batting average, 15 home runs, when 18 home runs was the leader. For his first, not counting his rookie year, for his first 8 years, he averaged way above 300. And then for the rest of the career, he's down in the 260s. And I haven't been able to determine what occurred. A major injury or something occurred. His capability dropped off dramatically. And so from what I read about him, the controversy is a bad, sour reputation among teammates and owners, et cetera, might have kept him out, and that significant drop off. And he's borderline statistically. And I put him in here thinking maybe somebody was a fan of this guy being in the Hall of Fame.
I noticed that Matt Daly just put his a link to his bio on the SABR site, SABR.org bio project. So that if folks are interested in what Roger's been talking about as far as Bill Dolan's borderline Hall of Fame credentials, his bona fides, that article is probably a good place to go check that out.
Yeah, he's been on some SABR list. He's been on, you Google him, you know, who should be in the Hall of Fame that isn't. And he's certainly not on every list. I looked at about 20 lists. He was on 11 of them. You know, I looked at the list. I became interested in this guy for some reason. And I looked at a large group of lists, only their top 10 players. And on 11 of the 19 or 20 lists, he was in the top 10.
Roger, question?
Yeah, yeah.
Do you happen to know how you acquired, not you acquired this card, but when back in the day, how did somebody get this card from Plow's Candy? Was it wrapped? Was it in a wrapped piece of candy or something? Being that thin, was it?
You know, I'm not absolutely sure. Let me see if in my notes, because I tried to track those kinds of things down, and I don't have that in my notes, so I don't know. It's an unusually big size. My suspicion is it was a mail-in thing where you cut the coupon off the package and needed 10 and sent it in, because it is very thin. It's paper and it's very large for the era, you know, to fit into a box or something.
Yeah, that makes sense. I bet it was a mail-in.
Okay, Matt, next slide, please. See how we're doing on time here? Okay.
Yeah, we're doing all right.
Okay. T206. This is the holy grail for many collectors. If I had to say 3 sets for their era, it's the T206 white borders, the old judges, and then the tops of 50s and 60s. Other people may have a different opinion. Clearly at the time, this was the set to collect by kids. It was the most widely produced, 523 subjects. It wasn't until the 52 tops that any set, any type of card produced that many players. There's many different tobacco companies participate in this, all owned by the same conglomerate. Piedmont is the least rarest. There's a total of 16. It was the American Tobacco Trust that basically bought out almost every other tobacco company and squashed them. Those of you familiar with the Hannes Wagner rare card, it's a T206. This is where it comes from. There's only 57 of his cards that are known to exist. Your friend and mine, Keith Oberman, who's many of you may know, is top shelf collector and writer about baseball cards, former ESPN, now political analyst, etc. I've kind of lost track of him. He's pretty certain that the prevailing notion on Hannes Wagner not wanting to get off the card because of not being a tobacco user was not the case. Oberman believes, his research shows, well, he was on a couple of other smaller tobacco issues, and that he feels he's found documentation that was all about money. Wagner didn't feel he was getting paid enough. It's still, I don't know if that's widely agreed to. That's his position. He's well regarded in the collecting community. So I would give it some credence.
And a SABR member.
Okay.
Put that there too, so.
People like Wayne Gretzky owned this card. He has been involved in a long-standing suit because after he bought it, it was determined to have been trimmed. Trimming means expertly cutting, reducing the size so you've got nice sharp corners and edges. And Tom Candiotti, former pitcher, owns one. The most recent auction a PSA 2. You might remember from Glenn's presentation, very bad quality, went for $1.3 million.
Jeez.
The
Wow.
card.
Hmm.
1916, the highest rated PSA was a PSA 5, was auctioned at $3.2 million. PSA 5 on that 10-point scale.
Roger,
Yeah.
did these cards come in packs of cigarettes?
Yes, one per pack.
One per pack. Wow. And there were 100, it says 150 subjects on there, but you said 300? 300?
Over the 3-year period, 523 different players, a large number of minor league players, which was common. So on Piedmont, there may have only been 150, but then there's Sweet Caporal, you go on, there's 16 tobacco backs, there's 16 cigarette products that carried these cards.
Well, they had to smoke a lot to get a set.
You know, a good question would be, does anybody have a set? I'm kind of, I'm doubtful. I should have Googled that. Does anybody have a complete set?
Wow.
Okay, next slide, Matt, please. I threw these in here. This was a premium. This rivals the Allen and Ginter among some collectors as the most beautiful cards. You look at the size of them. You sent in coupons from either Turkey Red, and they're referred to as Turkey Reds, T3s, 10 coupons from the cigarettes, and you'd get one of these. There's 100 different players, but it also includes other kinds of athletes. I'm just looking on an iPad, but I think you'd be able to read that whole, I think the whole first column is non baseball players, and maybe Jack Johnson is the last name on the first column. Maybe it is.
It is.
A boxer. So again, it was all sorts of athletes, again, beautifully rendered and highly regarded and sought after. But, you know, relatively few in number because they were a premium. The pitcher you're looking at was a wild spitballer. He had one outstanding year. Eddie Plank got injured in 07 with Philadelphia, and Dygert went 21-8, the 2.34 ERA, but he led the league in hit batsmen and in walks. A wild guy. He, in the minors, because of his wildness, went to the minors, injured himself, and had a short career in the minors.
I noticed,
Okay.
Roger, I noticed that they still separate base and ball.
Yeah, good read. We're back to separating it.
Yeah.
Second name in the first column is Abe Attell.
I'm sorry, Dixie?
The second name in the first column is Abe Attell.
Attell, yeah. Okay, next one, Matt, please. Another unusual card, not highly collected. I put it in very distinctive. They obviously a different size, almost square in format. Had 121 different players, including minor leaguers. This pitcher had 3 20-game seasons, so you're more than a serviceable consecutively, more than a serviceable pitcher. It's not gold leaf. That was what they tried to make it look like. And so this was kind of a very unusual for tobacco cards, kind of an oddball card. Okay, Matt, next one, please. The T205s, 6 and 7, same company, American Tobacco Trust, same idea, much smaller in number. There's 209 different players in this series. They were much less popular. I'm not sure why. They're called gold borders. The card here is faded. It was kind of a goldish green color around the border. Hall of Famer here, I guess somewhat controversial Hall of Famer. It might be interesting to compare him to Darlene in terms of their career. He batted 270 over his career. The league batted 262. I thought that was a little bit of an interesting thing. It's kind of a Bill James kind of thing to compare you to your contemporaries. And again, several different backs, same company, different tobacco products. It was distributed, same size as the more famous and T206s. Okay, Matt?
Wait, can I ask you a question on that?
No, Glenn, I'm fed up with you. Go for it.
What, I can't read it, on the back of the card. Is that a story of kind of his life or what?
Yeah, it's his baseball bio and his last 3 years, games, batting average, and fielding average. Yeah.
So it's
So
just
yeah, it's a little bio.
a little bit, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Matt, next one, please.
Yeah, I think that's one of the few we've seen so far, by the way, that has a kind of bio or write up on the player on the back.
Okay. I put this in here, lesser collected, 50 cards, including 11 of minor leaguers, a total of 100 different players. So players doubling up, pun intended. It's called the Mecca Double Folder, cigarette company again, Mecca Cigarettes. And this was the first attempt at this kind of novelty. It's unusual side. So what you see on the left is, in essence, the front of the card. What you see on the middle is the back of the card. And if you can imagine flipping that middle card back, so now it's, if you took the card on the left and at about the 1/3 point folded it came folded, you would get the card on the right. And in the card on the right, it's a little bit different sized here, but it's the same size. If you look at the legs, the socks and shoes, you'll see they're the same in both. I hope I'm describing what's going on. You basically fold down the top third and you get
a Mad Magazine, but not with the humor.
There we go. Yes. Mr. Coombs there had one phenomenal year, 31-9. He led the league. 1.3 ERA average, earned run average, only behind Ed Walsh at 1.27. The Philadelphia A's got all sorts of players like this. 1 or 2 years had phenomenal years in that period. The catcher was a serviceable catcher, you can see from his stats. So following up on that, next slide, Matt. Following up on that, Hassan Tobacco Company tried to outdo them. They went with what they call a triple folder. They put 3 players on a card. The card came with the 2 outside flaps, if you will, folded in, and it was inserted in the cigarette pack. So when you opened it up, you got the front side there with a 3rd player and then a story. So bios of both players here, and then a little story of the action and player or players in the middle scene. Not highly collected, somewhat popular among collectors because it's unusual, but a different kind of card for the area among the many different tobacco products that came out.
Roger,
Yeah, Ken.
are the two players in the black and white photo in the middle, are they the same players that we're seeing on the outside? Do you know?
No, different. It's always a different player. And I've read that thing over and over and can't determine exactly. Talk about Hal Chase being in an awkward position, and then refers in, and I'm not sure who they're talking about. I've read that thing like 3 or 4 times, but no, it's always a different player or players in the middle.
Okay.
And that's a photograph, Roger?
Yes, it is.
So I've got a question. Is that when was the earliest actual action photograph on these things?
You know, I'm a photography buff and I should know.
Because
I don't, Ben. Yeah,
yeah, because I think it's like 1971 tops is when they first started putting them into the top sets. So seeing this in a 1912 typeset, this is kind of fascinating to see this.
Very unusual. Yeah.
Wait a minute, there are action shots in the 56 top set. Behind the picture.
Action photographs, or were they pictures, drawings?
No, they were photographs of action.
Oh, the like in action subsets. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, but still, 1912 is
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, predates that by 40 something years.
And the significance of William Bergen.
Yeah.
Nothing really other than the lowest batting average for a player with his number of at-bats,
That's right.
3,200 plus at-bats.
That is significant.
Yeah, 170, as you can see there. Yeah. Dixie, you knew that?
Sure.
Wow. Okay. I'm a catcher fan, so I know a lot about catchers, but I thought that was a pretty obscure piece of information.
Well,
Yeah.
it's not in Boston, since we had his brother who killed his entire family.
Okay.
You learn about the Bergens easily that way.
Okay.
Jeez.
Okay. I hope everybody picked up on that. 170 batting average for 3,200 at bats.
Wow.
It's not the Mendoza line, it's the Bergen line.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes the Mendoza line look pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really?
So next slide, Matt, and we're okay. I'll go through here quickly. Again, same company, a smaller series, popular among kind of a small cult of people because of the colorful backgrounds. And these were called brown background. They simply looked different, and there was an attraction to people with this set, and mainly because there's 200 subjects, of which many, it's the only time they ever appeared on a card.
Wow.
For some reason, they really focused on lesser known players. There's only 13 Hall of Famers in this set. And normally, as you would expect, it's a much larger percentage, typically 20 to 40% in the tobacco sets are Hall of Famers, even duplicating the top stars. And they went off that here, and therefore at the time, not a popular set.
I wonder if that's part of that Honus Wagner story about the stars wanted money. That might be easier.
Yeah, good thought, Jim. Could be, yeah. But this is the same company. Their last series, their least distributed and smallest one, not physically smallest, same size.
Yeah, that might have been the company saying, forget it then after that.
Okay, Matt, next slide, please. There was one Canadian tobacco set in this era. 90 different subjects. They're all the players are from the Eastern League. You see a little bio there and following their history. There's 2 Hall of Famers in this set, Joe Kelly and Ironman McKinney, who went up there and played after his career, and he's in this set. I just put it in. It's unusual, it's extremely rare. The fronts change a little bit, but you can see what they are. They're studio photographs, all portrait types, no action. Okay, next slide. These were very unusual for the time. These were glossy black and white photographs, a large size. They were rolled up in the tobacco product. Of all the athletes, 52 of them are baseball players. This particular guy was the first European to pitch in a World Series. Played for the Phillies against the Red Sox in 1915, 8 innings, 2 earned runs, took the loss. He was born in Scotland. Next slide, Matt. In that pantheon of most beautiful cards, some people go with this. Quite rare, only 4 of the 25 subjects are baseball players. This is the one might have been a couple Hall of Famers. I'm not recalling correctly. Chief Bender, always been fascinated with him, Carlisle Indian School. He was selected in the Hall of Fame in '53. He died the week before the actual induction, but he knew he was going to be inducted. His mother was a Chippewa Indian. I've always found him kind of fascinating. I've several times read Connie Mack, to paraphrase him, if I had to have one pitcher for one game, this is the guy. And I've never heard the explanation for that, but he was a high quality pitcher, obviously. Next slide, Matt, please. This was the biggest, well, not the biggest. We started to get into the D series in the American card catalog are baking companies, and they started producing these cards similar in size to the tobacco cards. They were shoved in various baking products, primarily bread. The artwork, there was an earlier series, the American Caramel series, we looked at many of the same images, and this happened a lot. Remember, you're seeing about 23 of the 500 sets of cards in here. Very common for one studio to produce a lot of photographs, a lot of colored prints, a lot of paintings, and then market them to all sorts of providers of cards. So some of these players are just repeated the same image. And most of these in this series are that case. They come from the Caramel series. This gentleman known as had a rocket arm. He still holds the American League record for assists by a catcher, 212 in one season. Think about 212 assists by a catcher in one season. I know it was a different era. He's thrown out more than one a game. Okay, next slide, Matt, down to the last two. Tip Top Bread. Among the bread issues thought to be the most attractive, this set was a team set. It was the Pittsburgh Pirates only. There are these pastel paintings. You could take 50 labels from the bread company and send in and get the whole set. It includes other people beyond players. You'll see Barney Dreyfuss on there if you can read it. I guess the creator is the wrong word. Instigator of the World Series, perhaps. Dots Miller was an infielder, average ability, but he's got himself a card because they produced all the key players on the Pittsburgh team of that year. It's in here because it's collected for its attractiveness and its rarity. Okay, Matt, last one. Sporting News. We all know Sporting News. They initially produced some small cards. You can see the size there. They then later, for years, produced real large photographic paper prints that came in there in Sporting News issues. But this was their cards. Started a long series of supplements. This particular one, there was 200 different players. Again, the images come from all sorts of places that were used previously. Babe Ruth's rookie card is in this series. The first time he ever appeared on a baseball card is here. It's not a highly collected series. Babe Ruth fans go for his card. I found an auction where a PSA 7 on that 0 to 10 scale in 2018 sold for $384,000, the Babe Ruth rookie card. This particular Pants Rollin', several places I saw, and it may have been on the SABR bio, said the unlikeliest manager of a World Series champion in history. He was the first to manage in a World Series, not having been a player. And he managed 4 years. His 3 years were 93-61, 89-65, 154, 100 wins, 54 losses, World Series champs. His roster got depleted. And you might notice it's the Chicago White Sox, 1918. You know what's happening next. And he was let go because of the 53, 57, and 67 record in 1918. And by the luck of it, therefore, not associated with next year's team. So I thought that was a little bit interesting to put in here, both because it's Sporting News and the manager, and kind of an, to me, unusual history. And that completes your looking at type cards up to 1920. Certainly will answer any questions you have.
One quick question, Roger. What did tobacco companies just quit producing cards, or did they stop and come back later after 1920 maybe, or?
I'm not sure. That's their, so they had two heydays, late 19th century,
Yeah.
and then the T205, 6, 7 cards. I'm an avid type collector, and maybe the one person that knows a lot more about this than I do, if he's listening, can chime in. I don't, off the top of my head, recall another tobacco series later on. I certainly could be wrong. I mean, there's 500 series to come, and I certainly don't know them all. But it's certain there was no major series ever after the 05, 6, and 7 tobacco series.
So is there a catalog or any reference that actually lists all of these?
Subsequent series, but you can't hear me.
What, Rick? Yeah, Rick, you're frozen. I'm sorry, Ben. What was the question?
Can you guys hear me? Can you all hear me? Yeah.
It's coming in pretty slow and broken, Rick.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Rick knows the answer to that. He's the guru on type cards, by the way. Yeah, Ben, there's the American Card Catalog was a card last printed in 1960, was the resource on all kinds of cards in the United States. Sports Collectors Digest now puts out a thing called Vintage Cards, which I believe goes through 1950, and that's a major resource presently. But as I said beginning, I just found all sorts of additional information on the internet, which I never had access to before. But the go-to publication is Sports Card Digest Vintage Card Catalog.
Just an observation. I thought it was interesting 140 years ago where pool players and billiard players and marksmen are listed as the athletes of the day, or the stars of the day. So do you have a card for Miss Annie Oakley?
She is on. She's on.
That's why
she's on tobacco cards. And she's on many cards.
But I saw her name on.
Yeah, I don't have such a card.
No, okay.
I don't believe she played baseball.
Roger, did you only collect baseball players on your type cards that you collected?
Yeah. As a kid, I also collected football cards, but no, on the type collection. And just real quickly, because we're out of time here. I fell into it because I was a musial collector, and I traveled a lot by car in Florida and then occasionally out of state. And I'd go into this is before the internet. I'd pull out the yellow pages in the phone book and call people, and do you have any unusual musial cards? And they'd go in. And frequently they'd say, well, I've got some unusual cards, and they'd pull them out. And they were always relatively cheap. And that's how I got started in it.
There is a SABR member from Boston who now lives in Jacksonville, Bob Richardson. He has all those Annie Oakley Buffalo Bill cards, all of them.
Wow.
And I do want to say lastly, and Glenn, I know you know this, I'm sure you can second it. Matt did absolute yeoman work on this. What you see is Matt. I just sent him an email with the information. He did everything else. So thank you for this, Matt. First class.
Oh, you're welcome. I thought the presentation was first class in terms of the content and the cards, and I'm looking forward to next month. Roger, what is next month's presentation going to cover? 1920 through
1950.
1950. Okay, cool. All right, good deal. So definitely looking forward to that. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Any final questions for Roger?
Great job, Roger. Thank
Yep.
you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, folks. We have reached that magic time again. As always, appreciate y'all joining us for the monthly social here, and we will see you again next month, first Wednesday, 7 p.m. Zoom. And of course, I'll send out the invite like I did this month about a week in advance or so. And let me know if you'd like to do an article presentation just like Kent did for us tonight. I'll be happy to get you on the agenda. Anything else for the good of the order?
Thank you, Matt.
Yep.
All right.
Good job.
Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it. You all have a good evening, a good week. Stay safe, and a good Labor Day weekend as well.
Same.
You too.
All right. Take care.
See you guys.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
League meeting.